Okay, so welcome to the AI in Manufacturing podcast here on Industry Forward TV. I'm your host, Kudzai Mandi Teresa, and today I'm joined by Patrick Byrne, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Anorai AI. So the topic of discussion today is going to be about finding opportunities for AI in manufacturing. Patrick, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really excited to get started.
Awesome stuff. So maybe before we kind of like kick things off here, could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a bit of a background about Anurai?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a little bit on me first. My background is mechanical and manufacturing engineering. From there, I went on, I worked at Intel for a few years as a data analyst and a data scientist. And I used AI and data to identify savings opportunities for energy conservation and asset management projects. And that was when I was first introduced to AI, automation, and predictive analytics, which is used for predictive maintenance. And now I work with manufacturers to find, quantify, and implement AI use cases in their businesses with an emphasis on solving kind of real world problems and increasing profits by targeting digital waste.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like interesting that you mentioned digital waste. So maybe to kind of like set the context here for our audience, could we maybe begin by giving us an explanation of what is digital waste and why is it critical for manufacturers to address it?
Yeah, absolutely. So digital waste is essentially anything within your digital footprint, your digital processes that slow your team down. So a lot of manufacturers have disconnected systems, and people end up spending way too much time searching for information, creating reports and data visualizations manually, and then manually entering data, manually compiling data, and moving data around into different places. So the easiest way that I like to explain this is kind of in the same terms of lean manufacturing. So if you look at the eight wastes of lean manufacturing, to start off with something like inventory, people have a lot of data spread across different systems. So if you think of data kind of like your inventory, they have a lot of data that they're not using, which is kind of like an inventory waste to a degree. And then transportation, if you were looking at people moving data between two, three different systems to create reports, that would be kind of like a transportation waste. Motion would be checking multiple places to find information. So if you have information, say on like a SharePoint site or in your ERP system, and you're going into multiple places to try to find that information, that would be kind of a motion waste. And then waiting. So, for example, if I am looking for a standard in order to continue my work, I might need to check in, or I might need to send an email to somebody who can help me to find it. And that often happens in your customer service department or in your sales department where they're trying to find some information that they need to give back to a customer. You've got things like overproduction, where a person doesn't know where a standard is. So they either sometimes they end up going to create a new standard. So they're kind of duplicating previous work that was done, and then over processing. So manually entering information across different places, as well as manually answering the same questions. So I'm sure a lot of people that are listening will have that thing where maybe they're a subject matter expert in their business and they get asked the same question over and over again. So that's kind of like an over processing. And you've also got things like defects where manual data entry into systems can cause errors where people maybe enter the data wrong or they forget to enter the data sometimes, where you end up with gaps in your data. And then you've got underutilized talent, which I think is probably the biggest one in across all of this, because if you've got really high value staff that you're paying a lot of money to and they spend a lot of their day on these things that are kind of digital waste, so doing a lot of low value tasks of entering data into systems, searching for information, I think that that's underutilizing the talent that you've got at your disposal.
Awesome. So maybe to kind of like make it this more, concrete for our audience, maybe with the view of painting, what kind of like, what would be the impact on companies' bottom line as far as digital waste is concerned? Could you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, definitely. So searching for information, if we were to look at that as one of these buckets, searching for SOPs that you need to continue your work. If especially if you're a new employee, you might be looking for, say, a standard that you need because you want to make sure that you're doing your job correctly. And if you can't find that standard, if it's difficult to find that, that might slow you down. It might lead to project delays. It might lead to, shipping your products late, or just not being able to keep up with demand, right? And it can also lead to, for example, if I was searching for product information, or pricing updates that I needed to get back to a customer. Say a customer has asked me a question if I'm in the service or the sales department, that can lead to, slower replies, which can be slower sales cycles, low customer satisfaction, and sometimes just incorrect pricing. You may give a customer an old price, something that was maybe from a couple of years ago, and obviously prices are increasing a lot at the moment across all different industries, and you may end up selling something at a loss or just at a very small profit margin. Then, if we look at lack of data visualization, a lot of manufacturers don't have clear visualization of their data, and especially that can be things like inventory levels. So, if you don't have good visualizations of your min max levels in terms of what amount of inventory you need to have, that can lead to stockouts, where that can be project delays, or it means that you have to expedite shipping, which could cost you more money in your shipping. It also could be inventory waste. So it could be having too much inventory of certain items that maybe don't actually get used that much because you're trying to prevent against things like stockouts. Um, then we could look at, supplier spend tracking. So supplier spend tracking dashboards can be used to negotiate discounts. So this is something at the moment that's really important, because if you look at all of the talk around tariffs that's going on at the moment in the US in particular, price changes are going to be very common in manufacturing in 2025, because these are going to have knock-on effects on the whole supply chain. So if you have a very good understanding of how much money you've spent with all of your suppliers and how much money you're going to spend in the future with your suppliers, you can go to your supplier and say, hey, look, I think we should be getting a bit of a discount here because we're very, loyal to you and we're buying all this stuff from you. And that could be 2 to 5% in a lot of cases that you can get with a supplier discount there. And then if we look at the manual repetitive tasks, things like creating quotes, creating bills of materials and sales orders, if you're doing a lot of that and it means that you take longer to reply to your customers, that can be longer sales cycles. But you could also miss out on some deals because your competitor has gotten back to them quicker and they need to get moving on this right away. So they just agree to work with your competitor. And it's also opportunity cost of that salesperson's time, because if they're spending time compiling quotes and sales order, that's time that they're not spending, reaching out to customers or building relationships with your customers. And then another one then on manually entering data into multiple different systems, or if you have data that doesn't flow across your company into all the systems that you use. Firstly, that's, again, an opportunity cost on that person's time that they could be spending on more important tasks. But you can also get data inaccuracy, like what we talked about earlier, where you've got incomplete data, which can have lots of downstream consequences, like, as we said, stockouts and things like that, and project delays.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating because like all these, sort of like examples that you're, sort of like bringing up, are things that are obviously common, throughout a whole lot of, manufacturing enterprises. So, I mean, for someone who's kind of like, listening to this and say kind of like recognizing, that as being one of the, digital waste within their company. And obviously here was sort of like, kind of like recommending to say use AI to be able to solve or eliminate that digital waste. How can they, systematically identify which AI products, to be able to apply on which, or rather which AI project to apply on which specific digital waste problem in a way that they would kind of like get the highest return on the value of investment.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And really, I think that before people start looking at individual projects and starting to plan out, like, or starting to work on individual projects, I think they need to create a plan across their whole business for how they're going to use AI. This is really kind of a once in a generation new technology, right? This is a really big thing to get right. And if you fail to prepare on how you're going to use the technology, then you will likely fail. So I think that companies need to be looking at creating a plan across their whole business. And we create that for companies and we call it an AI action plan. And the purpose of that AI action plan is to show the current state of the company and look at all of the different systems and processes across the company and show them where they could get and give them that picture of the future state. And it's for companies really who kind of know they need AI, but they're not sure where to start. And when we go through this AI action plan, what we do is we look at the company's goals. So, where does the company want to be in, let's say, 1 or 2 years? And we want to align everything that we do across this AI action plan to that goal. We'll talk to all of the different department leaders and we'll look for these digital waste opportunities in those individual departments. And we'll look for the ways that an individual problem or an issue in one department is kind of causing downstream effects in other departments. And we'll look at ways that we can use AI to solve those problems. And once we've found ways that we can use AI, we'll quantify the financial impacts. So things like annualized savings, return on investment, and we'll look at the timeline of how long it will take to implement these projects. And then we'll rank them in order of the impact of each of those projects. And we'll create a 12 to 24-month roadmap of how they can go from their current state to that future state, as well as providing a lot of information on how we recommend they go about their training and some other tools that they might want to look at that maybe aren't directly affecting some of these things, but they kind of are causing inefficiencies across the whole business.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a, a whole lot of AI applications to consider for a lot of manufacturers, right? We may have like, big operations. So where would you kind of like recommend companies start looking at sort of like as far as, maybe bringing you in when they think of, implementing AI? Where should they start looking at kind of like from their operations?
Yeah, so there's a lot of simple projects that you can look at that are kind of across every manufacturing business that we've seen. And I can give you a couple of examples, which would be a lot of manufacturers in the industrial or machinery space, which is where we work mostly. They have service contracts for the machines that they sell. And in a lot of cases, they don't have a system for notifying anyone internally or their customers when there's a warranty going to expire soon. And that's a great opportunity to sell service contracts. Uh, if you can let the customer know, your machine that is really important to your day-to-day operations is going to be out of warranty in 1 month, which means that you won't necessarily have the same coverage. So if you can tell them that in advance, you'll be able to sell more service contracts. I also really like data visualization projects for like a first start and starting off with AI, because things like supplier spend tracking and inventory tracking that we talked about before, they have big impacts across the whole business. And if you can start to have a good picture of data in the individual departments, you can start to build, company wide dashboards where you can see the performance of the company at a glance. And in terms of the automation of manual tasks, things like creating quotes automatically, creating bills of materials automatically, but also just things like automated note takers for meetings. If you can reduce having somebody manually taking notes, because that may be, firstly, you're distracting someone who is part of the meeting and it's harder for them to contribute when they're taking notes. But it's also a lot more inconsistent and they may miss some information. They may not collect all the action items. Whereas if you have an AI system that does that really helps. Also, you've got things like integrating different systems. So if you have an ERP system, but you've also got a CRM system separate to that, which a lot of manufacturers do, if you can connect those systems and make sure that anything that's entered into your CRM that should be also entered into your ERP, that it does that automatically rather than having to force somebody to enter the information into two different places, that you can get a lot of efficiency from that. And it's actually important to note as well that a lot of the things that I'm talking about are not generative AI. It's not, real implementation of AI systems. But what we do is, and what we recommend other people do, is that you use generative AI to help develop these things a lot faster, because AI is very good at writing code. So you can use AI to help you develop these integrations a whole lot faster than you would be able to without it. But in general, I think if you're someone who's looking at implementing AI right now, and you maybe don't have the expertise in house, like you don't have an AI engineer internally, you really should be looking at having a partner to help you with this. And the reason for that is AI projects do have a lot of risks, and a partner can help to mitigate against a lot of these risks. So, for example, the failure rate of AI projects is quite high in general. I've seen quotes of 60 to 80%, depending on what sources you look at. But because of this, it's extremely important that you get the first AI projects that you do right, and that you use the ROI from those projects to reinvest into the next projects. So if you can pick a project that starts to generate returns quite quickly, you can then roll the savings from that or the benefits from that into your next project and keep investing without having to, invest more of your actual capital in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yes, please
Uh,
go.
in terms of like other risks that are up there and that need to be kind of taken into account, you've got data security and proprietary information that manufacturers maybe don't want to be leaked out into the world. And if you don't have the background in data and AI systems, you maybe don't have the expertise to be able to protect your systems against data leaking out into public AI systems and that sort of thing. And just in general, that hiring for this type of role is very difficult because the talent pool is really small. So the best AI engineers are mostly starting businesses right now. They're working at big tech companies, they're working at software companies. It's very difficult to, if you're a small manufacturing company anywhere less than a couple thousand employees, it's going to be very difficult for you to attract that high talent. But even if you do manage to attract that high talent, you're then going to have a single point of failure essentially in your business, where that AI engineer maybe gets an offer to go join a Google or Microsoft or Facebook down the line. And now all of the expertise that you had in your business is gone, related to AI. So a partner in this case may be slightly more expensive in the short term, but the ROI is much higher, and it's much safer to go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an enchanted territory for manufacturers because, in manufacturing space, we're sort of like used to this idea that, you employ someone and then they stay for like 20 years, 30 years, like decades, right? And kind of like, as you mentioned, moving into the AI space, you're now kind of like moving more into like software and you're competing with likes of Google and Microsoft as far as talent is concerned, right? So, but kind of like what's interesting really about what you sort of like laid out here, it's that this is a significant investment, right? As far as AI implementation is concerned, and the goal really here with this podcast is to help manufacturers or manufacturing leaders rather kind of like think through how they can approach AI implementation, and a big part of that is quantifying the return on investment, right? And which can be really challenging since this is really a new space for really a lot of them. So, do you perhaps have a framework or approach that you suggest for manufacturing leaders to use to be able to sort of like pitch this internally?
Yeah. I actually have a way of calculating ROI and payback, which I don't know if it's common across the industry, but I like to look at a range because it's very difficult to say with absolute certainty what the effects are going to be of the project. So I like to show a super conservative example, and then I also like to show a more realistic example of what the savings in ROI could be. So we like to underestimate the savings on purpose, because if you can find a project that's profitable or that has a really good return on investment, even in a really conservative view, then it's a very good project. So if we were to talk about looking at conservative or that super conservative way of quantifying the project, what you're looking at in this case is you're only going to look at, real cash savings, so things that are really saving money in a hard sense. And that would be things like, if you can get discounts with your suppliers, for example. That's a physical cash saving that you can use into the future. We also like to look at revenue generation. So if there's something that you can do with AI that helps you to increase your revenue, that's a really good way to be conservative. We also like to look at time savings, but only time savings when there is a clear high value task that can replace the task that they're already doing. So, for example, if you know that, okay, we're working on something in our service department, and our service people are on the phones all the time, and because they're on the phones all the time, they're not able to work on that. That when they save time from being on the phone, that they're going to spend that time on something else. So that'd be a very clear task switch. We also like to ignore the downstream benefits in the super conservative scenarios. So there are a lot of downstream benefits, which we'll come on to in a second, but we don't include any of those in the conservative section. And we like to overestimate the costs and timelines of the project to show kind of like a worst case scenario. So what you're trying to do there is essentially show that even if this project took a lot longer than we expected to, it still generates a really good return. And then if we were looking at it in more of like a realistic scenario, what we would do in that sense is we would maybe add a value added multiple to the person's time. So if you save an hour of a person's time, you're not maybe just allocating the $50, let's say, of all in labor cost. Maybe you're adding like a 1.5x multiple to that just to account for the fact that they're moving from a low value task into a high value task. We'll also include some softer savings in that scenario that might be a little bit more difficult to quantify. Um, some of those things could be if you looked at um, higher retention. So, in a lot of manufacturing companies, people are working long hours. We've worked with companies where the average project manager was working 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week. And if you can save them some time, you may actually be able to reduce the amount of strain on that person and keep their satisfaction higher and reduce the amount of churn that you have. We'd also look at other time savings where the task which may not be as easily known right now, but it's not really our job to find where to use that time, right? The the task of finding out what to do with the person's time that you save is kind of more up to the company. And then we'll also account for some maybe improved outcomes. So if you can reduce any delays to your customers, or if you can reduce stock outs and things of that nature, that'll be another way that we'll account for that.
Yeah. I mean, do you perhaps have any real world, examples of, where, there was no evident ROI or lack thereof?
Yeah, I can give you a kind of a cautionary tale, I guess you could say, which would be try to lean away from big projects initially. So projects that will take a long time to see value from. So we like to start with projects that give you quick wins. So an example of this would be, if you want to do predictive maintenance in your business, that's probably not a good place to start because it's going to be quite expensive. It requires really good data, and it could take a long time for you to see value. Another example is, digital twins. Digital twins are amazing technology, and they're going to really help a lot of businesses over time, but they're quite expensive to set up. So they have quite a long payback period. But an example in particular of what we did before, and this was a mistake that we made before we kind of came up with the AI action plan, was we started on a project that was helping to organize documents across a whole company. And it was a RAG system. I'm not sure like if all the viewers will understand what RAG is, but RAG is retrieval augmented generation, and it's essentially helping to find information in your business. So the system that we built was searching through all of their documents to answer questions, and then it would pull up the document for that person. And this is a project that actually ended up finishing quite well, but it definitely took a lot longer than we had initially expected because they had so much data internally. This company had maybe 12 terabytes of information across their whole business. So that's obviously quite significant in terms of the total storage and complexity of that. And we're very lucky that we had a very good relationship with the client and they trusted us and they saw that the work that we were doing was going to work over time. But a lot of companies may be different in that sense. And if you start a project like this, it can lose momentum and potentially it could just lead to a kind of a failed project. Um, so yeah, I guess to balance that out in terms of like a success story for something similar, what I would say is solving real pain points for teams is a really good way to make sure that projects actually get the buy-in from the teams. So a couple of our biggest clients, they sell industrial machines, so big machines that cost, potentially millions of dollars in some cases. And they have this problem. Both of them actually had this problem where they have these spare parts lists that they sell with their machines, and that can take a really long time to put that together. That can be like a 40-hour project or 20 to 40-hour project to put that spare parts list together. And that's very difficult to find the time to do that, right? Like if that's only a small part of somebody's job, to find 20 hours to build something like this takes a long time, but it's a very high margin service offering. And they had a lot of demand for this, but they couldn't necessarily meet the demand and they couldn't supply it. So by creating an automation that would automatically create about 80% of that spare parts list, it's not going to do the whole thing. It'll give you a very good first draft. They're now able to sell significantly more of those spare parts lists and almost sell them with every machine sale. And we don't have exact numbers, I guess, on how much money that saved them, but the expectation when we did the project would be that it was kind of a $1 million a year in high margin revenue increase. And the project itself is like less than a $50,000 project. So that's, over a 10x ROI in the first full year, and, almost infinite if you look at it over time, because they only have to pay for that once.
Yeah. I mean, this is really, fascinating, and I would like to sort of like linger on this a bit, because especially on the cautionary tale, aspect of it, because you bring up two interesting, points, the fact that, things like predictive maintenance and digital twins, usually take long, to implement or get, results out of. But the strange, or rather the interesting part about it, is that these are the use cases that are sort of like, mentioned a lot by vendors or integrators. Whenever they bring up
Mm.
AI, they talk about predictive maintenance, digital twins. Why, maybe just to kind of like paint a picture for the audience here, why do you think those take long, or what is the reason why it takes long to really get value out of predictive maintenance or digital twins?
Yeah, so the reason that those are kind of the ones that are talked about, I think, most often is because they're really exciting. Like it's a really exciting thing for anyone to be like, oh, we've got a digital twin of our entire factory, and I can show you on this screen what's happening over here. And like it's a really cool project. And the same with predictive maintenance. It's like we know in advance when a machine's going to break down. So that saves us a lot of money on downtime and these things. And it's a very easy project to quantify the saving once it starts working. But it does take a long time to work because if I talk specifically about predictive maintenance first, it takes very high quality data in order to actually predict failures of machines. And a lot of manufacturers aren't collecting that data already. So the first thing that they're going to have to do, and this is also the same on the digital twin side, is you're going to have to spend a lot of money on sensors and fitting all these sensors. And It's going to be a lot of time for you're going to spend a lot of money on consultants. You're going to spend a lot of money on integrators. Then you're also going to have to pay for some software that's going to, maybe it's kind of like a CMMS, like a computerized, machine maintenance software that's going to store all this information. So it takes quite a long time to set that up and to make sure that all of it's working. And then you have to wait and collect some data over time as well, in a lot of cases, in order to make sure that it's accurate. So although they are really exciting projects and I think they're going to have a huge impact across the manufacturing industry, I really don't think that they're the low hanging fruit, let's say, like the easy things, the easy wins. And I think if you can start with those easy wins, the quick wins, then you're starting to build a bit of momentum and you can move into these projects later.
100%, 100%. Yeah, I mean, so kind of like seeing that really, manufacturers need to carefully, approach, with the prioritization of AI applications given, the limited budget or resources. How do you, how would you, advise, manufacturing leaders approach, how they prioritize which AI applications to sort of like start with?
Yeah, so we have a kind of a three item framework for how we prioritize projects, and it's impact, complexity, and time to value. So, impact is if we were looking at quantifying the amount of revenue that a project is going to deliver, the time savings, the alignment with the company's goals, and cross department synergies, that would give you a pretty decent understanding of the overall impact of that project. We'll then look at complexity of the project, which is, do we have the data available in the company already? Um, is that data of high enough quality, or are we going to have to do a lot of cleaning of the data first? What are the technical requirements? Are we going to need to build some new software in order for this to work, or do you already have the software internally, but you just need to connect a few systems? And what is the integration complexity or integration capability of the systems that you already have? So, does your ERP system have an API that we can tap into to actually pull the information from? Or are we going to have to do something like, um, exports on a specific time schedule and then pushing that into another database and just adding more steps and more complexity? And then the final one, time to value. So, what is the initial scope that we can get a minimum viable product of whatever it is that the project is trying to deliver? What is the speed to first results? So when do you start to see benefits from whatever the project is? And then how long does it take to complete the whole project? So by ranking across these, we can start to come up with a method of prioritizing which are the best projects to start with. But overall, I would always suggest that if you're a manufacturer and you haven't done any projects along these lines before, that you look for projects that can generate revenue for the business. If you have a high margin offering, a high margin revenue offering that you could sell more of, but you don't have the output capacity, like it's difficult for you to do more of that. And this could be service contracts. Um, this could be like that spare parts list project that I just talked about a couple of minutes ago. But you're looking for something that generates revenue that has a short payback period. And the reason for looking at those is you can use that revenue that you generate to create the budget for the next project.
Absolutely. Yeah, so kind of like, going back to, what I mentioned about how we sort of like, created or started this podcast rather because, there's been a lot of developments in the AI space, a lot of information out there, and it's hard obviously to keep up, especially for SMEs who would rather focus on kind of like really mastering what's going on in the shop floor in the factory. And what that does is that a lot of manufacturers choose to just kind of like wait it out and kind of like sit on the fence, right? And kind of like, just to see where this all leads, right? But rather what we've been recommending is to, really, get started in getting that digital fluency. So for that kind of, manufacturer who's sort of like sitting on the fence, what would you recommend as kind of like the, a good first step rather to kind of like, get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that they need to do or that they should look at doing is looking at that analysis of their systems and processes to find the best opportunity with something like the AI action plan that we spoke about. And really what we're trying to do is we would love to help as many manufacturers with this as possible. And with that in mind, we're actually going to do a bit of a giveaway for some of the viewers on the podcast here. And essentially, if you know you need AI, but you're not sure where to start, then I think this is a great place for you to do that. We're going to give we're going to help a few manufacturers find some opportunities for free. And we'll actually do a full AI action plan for one of the listeners completely free. And there will be some free resources for anyone available as well if they're not necessarily the winner of that. And we can come back to this at the end of the podcast. We'll keep moving for now, but I'll explain everything in more detail at the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so maybe kind of like to proceed here, let's talk about the challenges, right? Because I suppose obviously implementation of AI is not without its challenges. What in your experience are the biggest roadblocks that companies face when trying to implement AI?
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing is actually on the cultural side. I think a couple of years ago, 2, 3 years ago, maybe it was more of a technological problem that the tech wasn't quite there yet in a lot of cases. But the tech now is so good that as long as you're choosing projects that are in alignment with your business goals and that AI is quite good at things like automating manual tasks and data visibility and helping teams find information, then I think in general you're going to be fine. But on the cultural side, change management is always difficult, right? Because you're trying to change people's behaviors. You might have skills gaps that you need to actually fill and you need to train your team on. But there's also a fear of AI and a fear of change and a fear of lost jobs. And this is understandable. I can completely understand why people feel this way. But I personally believe that more jobs will be lost at manufacturing companies that don't use AI over the next 5 years than at the companies who do use AI, because the ones who do use AI will actually get more demand for their products and services because they can sell them at a better price. They'll be able to produce more at better quantities, and that will actually lead to more jobs, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I mean, one would argue that if obviously if you take a step back and kind of like zoom out, it makes sense obviously for manufacturers to adopt AI. But for the frontline worker on the factory floor, it's a different mindset shift culturally that needs to happen. In fact, I was speaking just yesterday with a guest on the podcast, and they were talking about this sort of like application where you could actually carry a voice recorder that monitors how someone executes their work. And so I think there is a feeling there that as soon as this AI is smart enough, I'll be replaced, right? And so how should manufacturing leaders sort of like foster that culture within the shop floor workers to be able to embrace AI?
Yeah, and that's actually I think that feeling is common across every company that we go to. And there's always a little bit of a fear of these sorts of things, of AI replacing people. But I think the way that you help people get past this is by including them early in all of the conversations that you're having around AI. Include people in the conversation, talk about why you're doing it. Like, why are you implementing AI? What is the reason behind it? And in a lot of cases, it might be because maybe your manufacturing company hasn't been profitable in the last couple of years, or you've been on the brink of profitability and you're looking for ways that you can increase profitability because maybe you want to continue to grow the company. And if you do explain these things, it's very easy to build that trust in the company and help to bring people along the journey as to why you think it's an important step for the company. Also, if you can help to solve real problems that these people are facing on a day-to-day basis by talking to them, like what we do in the AI action plan, where we have these conversations with the departments and try to solve their pain points, you're going to get a lot of people on side because maybe there's certain information that they need to find in manuals that they usually spend maybe a few hours a week searching for, and you can help them find that in minutes. That reduces the friction that they feel when they're doing the work, and that really helps to get people on side. But training people as well and helping them to learn about the technology will also reduce the fear around it too. And part of everything that we do when we help manufacturers is training. Like, we want to train the individual staff members on how to use generic AI tools, but also how to use the tools that we build for them too. And by doing that, you get them to understand the technology. They can kind of see where it could benefit them in not just their work life, but also in, their own personal life. And finally, just taking feedback from people as you progress through AI projects. It helps to establish that culture that everyone's on the same team. We're all working together, and, embracing AI is going to be really important for companies. So if you can continually build that culture and get people on board, that's going to really go a long way.
Awesome, awesome stuff. Right. So, I mentioned, the fact that, things are really moving fast as far as AI is concerned, and it's really hard for, SMEs to keep up, So, I would like to kind of like get your sense on where is this all headed? Which sort of like emerging AI technologies or trends do you believe kind of like are going to have the most, impact when it comes to manufacturing in the next, couple of years? Things are moving so fast that we don't know whether we want to project in terms of months, years, or decades, rather. So maybe in
Mm.
the near future, which ones do you think, manufacturing leaders should look out for?
Yeah, what you say is so true. It's the technology is moving so fast, and I'm not sure if you saw, but I think there's been new models from companies like Claude and ChatGPT, and everyone is bringing out new systems all the time. Even in the last week. So the technology is moving so fast that it can even be difficult to keep up with for people in the industry. But I think that when you're looking at the biggest technologies that are emerging and that are having an impact at the moment, things that we mentioned so far already, like, predictive maintenance and digital twins, are going to be very important. But I think that maybe what's most exciting for me, and something that we've been helping manufacturers with, is manufacturers making and selling their own software is something that I think is going to be more and more common. I think in the past, it's been a lot that manufacturers have spent a ton of money on ERP systems, and oftentimes they haven't really been fit for purpose, and it hasn't really worked out for them the way that they wanted to. And we think that a lot of manufacturers are going to start to build tools internally over time because of uh, the ability that AI gives people to develop software at such a rapid pace. And the problems that people are feeling with ERP systems, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners will have, is you may have an ERP system that has thousands of features or hundreds of features, and you use 10% of those features, and the 10% that you use don't really work exactly how you would like them to. And because AI is giving people the ability to create custom software, this won't be as much of a problem in the future. But also, then manufacturers making software for their customers too. So if you're a manufacturing company that has a machine that you sell, it's going to be a lot faster for you to iterate and improve on that. And we're working with a company at the moment who wants to add a predictive maintenance model onto the machines that they sell to their customers. And this wouldn't have been possible, 3 or 4 years ago. But now with AI, it's becoming more possible that they're able to do this. Robotics, I think, is a really interesting thing that uh, is probably not there in a lot of industries yet. We're seeing some really cool applications for robotics, but it's a it's advancing at a really rapid pace at the moment. I'm really excited to see where that goes over time. We actually work with a company who I'll give a shout out to here, MPI Systems, that make automated wax assembly cells. And that's a technology that is really taking off. And they've been doing that for quite a long time, actually, but it's something that is really starting to pick up momentum. And I'm sure you'll have or maybe a lot of the listeners will have heard people talking about AI agents and what AI agents are going to be able to do within their businesses. And the impact of AI agents are going to be huge. Like having an autonomous agent be able to go and execute tasks for you is going to be massive. But again, the low hanging fruit is definitely more of the stuff that we talked about earlier in the conversation. And I think if people get that stuff right and they lay the foundation for this stuff that we've just talked about here, then I think they're going to do really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really insightful, particularly this idea about, custom software, for manufacturers. It 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 captures, sort of like a notion that I heard from a thought leader who, talked about this idea that manufacturing is moving from, this idea where everything is just electrical and mechanical, not so much, software really involved there, to where it has become a software battle, right? And it will be hard for manufacturers to win that battle using someone else's software, right? So they're going to be
Mm.
forced to be able to really build their own software. So that's kind of like really insight reminded me of that sentiment. So yeah, I mean, again, so thank you so much for the session. But I really want us to, take, some time here to go through your giveaway for our listeners here before we close this session. So could you
Yeah.
maybe fill us in some more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what we're going to do is there's going to be a link down in the description, and by clicking on that link, that'll bring you to a landing page that's going to have a little bit more information about the giveaway. And in order to enter the giveaway, you'll just have to answer a couple of short questions about your business, and this will just be to help us understand whether we can help you or not. So it's kind of like a qualification of whether we can help you or not. If you do qualify for the giveaway, you'll be entered into a draw where you can win a full AI action plan for free. And this is something that usually costs between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on how big your company is. If you don't win, you could still get one department for free. So generally, the AI action plan looks at your whole business, whereas we'll just look at one department for you completely for free. And if you don't win or you don't qualify, in that case, we'll still send you some free resources on how you can create your own AI action plan yourself. So everyone's still going to get some value from this, and they will really have some better understanding of how they can go and build this AI action plan, because it is a really important thing that people get right the first time. And yeah, we just hope that we can provide some value and help people with it.
Awesome. And how long is this giveaway going to run? Because I know this video is going to live on YouTube. Someone is gonna, watch this, 6 months down the line. Someone is gonna listen to this. So how long is this giveaway going to be running for?
Yeah, so I'm not sure when this is going to go live, this video, but we'll probably say, maybe 1 month from when this video goes live, we'll allow people to filter through. So if you're watching this after 1 month, I am sorry, but it will have expired by then. But yeah, we'll give it about a month, and we'll let people kind of filter through until then.
Awesome stuff. So, Patrick, that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you so much for, taking the time to join us here and sharing your valuable insights with the audience. Really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, good. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, I really enjoyed the time today.